Hello, this is my contribution for our live class meeting this week. So, this was actually one of my favorite topics that we've discussed so far in this class, just because a huge focus of mine in the field is just cultural humility within the field of ABA in general. So my article critique that I selected to focus on this week was cultural humility in the practice of applied behavior analysis. So in this article, Wright discusses that one of the goals of ABA is to improve the human condition in a wide range of categories of practice and for diverse groups of individuals. So interesting enough, I'm actually at the Black Applied Behavior Analyst Conference this weekend here in Detroit, Michigan. I'm literally here. But this weekend I learned a lot about ABA. It was more so tailored to the Black community just because there's such a gap in literature and Black clinicians in the field. So if you look at the BACB, about 71% of BCBAs are white, whereas only 3.7%, it's around that ballpark, are Black. So we really got together to collaborate and discuss culture in the field. I went to a very interesting panel today that went beyond just culture and diversity as it refers to Black individuals in the field. So the speaker was she was Chinese, so she was identified as the Chinese culture, and the other speaker identified in the LGBTQ community. So he actually tied in the LGBTQ culture into the panel, which is very interesting. So one of the biggest takeaways was differentiating between cultural competence, cultural humility, and something else I forgot. But the biggest takeaway was that cultural competence is basically like knowledge about a culture, and then cultural awareness, right? So accepting that cultures are different from us is cultural awareness. Cultural competence is the knowledge about cultures, and then cultural humility is a lifelong practice of understanding and accepting different cultures. So a lot of times in different fields, we rely on the words like cultural competence, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we're accepting, what all these different cultures encompass. So in your lecture, you talked about social reinforcement and punishment in, culture and understanding culture. So you state that in every culture, certain actions are reinforced and others are punished by members of the group. So that's something that we also discussed as well in the conference. So one of the biggest takeaways was that within each culture, there are also subcultures, right? So every Black person doesn't have the same cultural values. Every white person doesn't have the same cultural values. Every person in the LGBT community doesn't have the same cultural values. So understanding how our culture is shaped by, reinforcement and punishment contingencies was very insightful. Let's see. So you also discussed culture from a humanistic perspective and then other species. So you said the variety of culture sets humans apart from other species. So before this lecture, I never thought about culture beyond the human species, but I think that you provided some very insightful information about what culture is in other species and how it can kind of be defined. It's hard because when I think about culture, I think about like vocal dissemination or like communication. So like we communicate how we like to behave or we expect others to behave. So other species like animals, they don't talk. So I always wonder like how are they disseminating their culture, but they do communicate in different ways, right? So I think that was very insightful as well. So you then go into transmission. So in the evolution of species, you say DNA transmits traits from parents to offspring. So in culture, individuals transmit behavior to other group members, right? So dissemination or transmission of culture doesn't necessarily have to be vocal. It just has to be communicated, right? So when it comes to animals, they may not vocalize the information about their culture, but it is communicated in a way that other species or other members of that community can understand. So kind of circling back to my article critique for this week, I will say this: I've learned to critique articles a lot better throughout this course. I will never forget what you said. It was the first lecture on how you critique articles when you first read the abstract and then go to look at the graphs to kind of understand what the results were, and then that's when you go in to read the study. I've been using that technique even with conceptual articles. I've kind of used that format as best as I can to pretty much understand, and I think that that's helped me to conceptualize arguments better and truly understand the content that I'm reading, because sometimes I find myself just reading through the stuff and not really understanding it, and I'm just typing my perception of it. But the way that you showed me was kind of challenged me to look at different understandings that an article may be trying to portray to me. So I think that this week's article was very meaningful to me, and I definitely am very interested in like the cultural humility aspect of the field of AV and in the field of psychology in general. I think it's super important. But yeah, thank you.